Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are just about to start the first of our live event webinars today. So welcome, everyone. Tell us where you're coming from. Tell us where you're watching us from. You can write in the chat if you're watching in Zoom. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can write to us in the comments. So this is our live event, Assessing Learning, a practical introduction. And over the next few months, we're going to be focusing on the professional practice of assessing learning. So today we have two sessions on meaningful assessment and effective feedback in language learning. But first, say hello, say where you're joining us from, and then we'll say hello to our two presenters. So we are just about to start the session. We have Assessing Learning, a practical introduction with our course tutors, Stephen Mander and Rabia Shafi. Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks, Melissa. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. How are you, Rabia?
I'm good as well.
Great.
Thank you for having
So,
us.
oh, no problem. We really enjoyed your session last year for World Teachers' Day, so we're really glad you're back. I can see there's lots of people from lots of different places in the chat. We've got people joining from Nigeria, Pakistan, from Yemen, from the Philippines, from Thailand, from Ukraine. So hello to everyone around the world. So before we start assessing learning, a practical introduction, I'll tell the audience a little bit about our two presenters today, Stephen and Rabia. So Stephen Mander is one of our courses for teachers, Facebook group tutors. You might recognise him if you're doing an online course with the British Council. So he's a teacher and teacher educator. He works in Portugal and he's over 20 years experience working with teachers and students in many different countries in the Middle East, in Africa and in Europe. And since 2015, he's been running and designing and mentoring programs for teachers around the world, like you. So we're really glad to have him. And he's joined with Rabia, who at the moment is his co-tutor in the Courses for Teachers Facebook group. You'll see them do lots of events together over the next 3 months. So Rabia is a teacher educator, she's a materials developer. She also has more than 20 years experience with teachers across Asia, the Middle East, the Americas and Africa. She designs and implements training. She works with teachers and teacher educators in public schools where she lives and works, which is in Pakistan. So welcome, Stephen. Welcome, Rabia. We are just about to get started. So I will hand over to both of you to start our first webinar today, Assessing Learning, a Practical Introduction. And then we'll be back at the end to do some questions and answers from the audience. So please participate. Please send us your questions. Rabia and Stephen will have time at the end to answer them. So, Rabia, Stephen, are you ready to get started?
Yep.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay,
I'll be here if you need me.
sorry, thank you. Okay, hello everyone, and thank you, Melissa, for the introduction. It's great to be here with you all today, and it's great seeing people from all over the world saying hello in the chat, from Oman, from Nepal, from Greece, from Turkey, Armenia, Ukraine, Italy, Vietnam. So it's great that you're all here today, and it's great to see all of you. As Melissa said, we're going to be talking about assessing learning today. And we're going to be looking at practical ways that we can assess our learners and help our learners develop as English teachers. Okay. So thinking about assessing learning, in the chat, could you tell us what do you think, or what do you hope to get from this webinar today? So, for example, Rabia, if you were attending this session, what would you hope to get from the session?
I think I'd love to get some practical tips of how to run assessments that are helpful not just to my learners, but for me as well, to know my learners better.
Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, it's all about the practical things that I can take into the classroom. So that's the thing that I would hope to get out of this. And I can see some nice things here as well. So Calderon's made a nice point about helping students with the stress and anxiety. Roland Waters to get some practical tips. Nazreen Tokar has talked about interactive ways of assessing learners. So hopefully we can talk about that as well. Okay, so we're going to be talking about assessing our learners, and assessing learners comes within the British Council's professional practices. So we're going to briefly look at what those practices are to give a kind of broad introduction. Then we'll talk about what assessing our learners is, and ways that we can find out about our learners' abilities and how to develop them and help us understand our learners as well. And we're also going to look at ways that we as teachers can develop in the area of assessing learning. So assessing our learners and helping them to develop, but also helping ourselves to think about assessment in different ways. So not just as a kind of standard test, but as other ways of assessing. So first, what are the British Council's professional practices? Okay, there are 11 of these, and I think we have them here on a handy little circle. These practices are basically areas that make up answers to the question, what makes a good teacher? So obviously, if you look at the top here, it says knowing the subject, and that's one thing that we need to know. We need to know what we're teaching, but obviously understanding our learners is part of that as well. And also, if you look at I'm sorry, I'm a little bit colorblind. I think it's purple. The bit at the bottom is about kind of things like making our classrooms inclusive, which is obviously something that's related to assessment as well, like making sure that assessment can be inclusive. And the areas we're going to be focusing on are the kind of pink areas, which is a color I can see, and assessing learners. But there are 11 teaching kind of professional practices that the British Council has. And we've got a couple of questions here for you to think about just to start us off today. So which practice for you here from this circle is your strongest, or cake? It looks a bit like a cake to me. And which maybe that's because I'm hungry. And which one challenges you? So for example, for me, I'm quite confident with things like managing the lesson and managing the learners. I'm quite confident with that. But I'm probably one that challenges me is definitely using multilingual practices. It's something I've done a little bit with, but it's not something I've done a lot of. How about you, Rabia?
Um, for me, I think managing comes with stress if I'm doing it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I'm really good at planning things in my like personal life and professional life. I take time, I prepare, and I joke that I have procrastination. I want to do it better and quickly. So I think that is my strongest practice. Unlike you, managing things, I feel a little bit less confident with that, especially time.
Mm-hmm.
I just overplan sometimes, although I think I'm very good at planning, but still, I need to work on managing the time and, not giving too much time to the learners, not giving too many explanation, keeping my talk time less so that we can manage time. So managing, I think the lesson is something I need to work on.
Okay, yeah. And there's a few in the chat here as well. So for example, Raja saying she's good in classroom management, but not so good in time management, which is similar to you, Rabia. And I think it's Fatea is saying that about using digital learning is something that she needs to work on. And yeah, we can all work on some of these practices. And the practices, like I mentioned, that we're going to focus on today are the pink ones here. And in particular, we're going to be looking at assessing learning. And I think one thing to remember, I have strengths when it comes to assessment, but there are definitely things that I can work on when it comes to assessment as well, which we'll talk about in this session. Okay, so as Melissa mentioned at the start, assessing learning is kind of one of the things that Teaching English is focusing on in July, August, and September this year. And what we mean by assessing learning is about kind of helping you develop your practices when it comes to assessing learning. So developing the ways that you assess, how you assess, when you assess. And we want to give you more ideas to kind of develop in that. And hopefully I'm looking forward to learning about different ways to assess as well. I've been talking about Rabia with this, and I think she's more confident than me, but there's definitely things that I can improve when it comes to assessing
Okay. I
learning.
think that's only because when in my context we rely so much on assessments and testing actually. So that is why I feel a bit confident. Okay. So moving on. So let's talk about what do you think. Stephen and I have been talking about what this session is to us, and you have also shared a little bit. So what's your definition of assessing learning? Could you write your definition in the chat? And there's no right or wrong answer. What comes to your mind when you think of the term assessing learning? I'll stop for a second and let's see the responses in the chat. So we have knowing what progress students have. It's going too fast. Analysis of the students.
There is definitely a lot there, yeah. And I think there's some nice ones. So Saba is saying to find out students' potential, which
Yeah.
is a nice way to put it, actually, in terms of potential rather than in terms of things that you need to improve. I like that word. That was quite a nice
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, and then I could see reflection a lot and knowing the progress, evaluation, areas to work as a teacher. Mahmood says that exactly to know how well my students have understood my lessons. Okay, understanding of students' progress in learning. Zana says, okay, let's do a quick activity where we work together and we design a definition together. So let's have a look at this gap and try to see what comes in this gap. I'll read it. The professional practice is about teachers and learners assessment. What do you think comes next? Stephen, can you help me with the chat?
Yeah, sure.
What do you think is the missing word? We've given you hints. It starts with L. The next letter is I.
Oh, assessment life is the first one that's there. Like, literacy, list, linear, limit. Literacy's down there a few times as well. I can see that. I mean, I find it quite interesting that there's a lot of life there, learner's assessment life. Like, you can't avoid it. It's going to be there the whole time.
Okay.
Okay.
So most of you guessed it right. It's assessment literacy, and that's what we're working on today. So understanding assessment, not just doing assessment, but also knowing what to assess, why we are assessing that, and what to do with what we have, learned from that assessment. So it's our ability to understand and use assessment and the tools, the types that we're using. And it's not just about our understanding, it's about our learners' understanding as well. So knowing about assessment, about the tools, why you're doing that, all of that is involved in assessment literacy. Let's move on to the next one. Let's do the same practice. Try to guess what's hidden behind these two boxes. Let's see who gets it right this time.
Okay, we've got some like assessment to do tasks, design tasks, deliver potential, develop different. Second one, obviously, a lot of people are saying measure progress
Okay.
and potential, practice.
Okay. So what do we do with tasks? Do we do them? What do we do before that? Before we give the task to the learners, what do we do?
We've got quite a few design in there, actually.
Okay. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think Rabia's lost connection there. I'll just get the slide up so we can share it again. Hold on, everybody.
Hi, Stephen. I'm here if you need me.
Yeah, I'll just. Oh no, Rabia's come back. I think must have lost
Great.
connection.
Okay. Thanks everyone for your patience. These
Yeah,
things
and
happen
that you're
when we're
also
working
writing in the
online.
chat, so that's I'm getting lots of good things there. Rabia, are you there?
I'll take a moment to say we've got fantastic contributions in the chat and the comment. Please keep them coming in. This is really great. And yeah, we should have Rabia back soon. Here she is.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
That's okay.
All right,
Okay.
I'll leave you now.
Okay.
Are you able to share again, Rabia, or would you like me to?
I did. Is it working now?
No. Ah, brilliant. And we got a welcome back from Lasma, which is very nice of her.
Okay. Can you see the screen now? Share it again.
It's just starting to share. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Okay. So we were talking about designing tasks. That is one of the most important thing, and something that we struggled with as new teachers because we didn't know what to assess. We just used assessments made by our seniors or heads, and we would just go and use that. But pandemic taught us that we have to do a lot by ourselves. So that is why learning about what are the principles and how can you practice designing tasks is very, very important. And then measuring the progress of the learners, I think that is the second most important thing, because we need to know, as Stephen and I, whenever we discuss, he always says the distance covered. We really need to know the distance covered by our learners so that we know where we can take them forward. And then what works in Stephen's context will not or might not work in my context. So local education policies and practices, you need to keep in mind that as well. Okay, promise this is the last slide. Testing for understanding of assessing learning. So would you like to guess? It's about using types of assessment, for example, dash and summative appropriately, and providing dash for learning purposes.
Oh, lots of Fs very fast there. Formative, findings, feedback. And for the second one, and provide, yeah, formative feedback, I think we've got the answer.
Yeah, yeah. So I knew they would get formative very quickly. And then somebody talked about findings, and I think, yes, assessing, there are a lot of findings involved with assessment. That could have been correct, but here we wanted to talk about feedback. So all of the things that assessing learning is all about is having the right kind of knowledge of the practices, assessment literacy, about designing the tasks, about the progress of the learners, different types of assessment, formative and summative, and above all, providing feedback. And how we're going to develop in all of these is what this whole webinar is about. How can we improve our literacy, and how can we improve in all of these areas? So Stephen is going to talk about something that we can do to develop in this area.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about these throughout the session today, but obviously there are certain ways that we can develop as teachers in our practice when it comes to assessing learning. So obviously the self-reflection is something that we can all do when it comes to assessments. When we create them, are there any problems that happen during the assessments? Are there ways that we can improve them? And this is the same like any self-reflection that we do on our lessons and ways to improve. So it's important that this happens. And I always tell teachers that I think the best teachers are always the most reflective teachers. So reflecting about assessment is definitely important. There are online communities that you can join. Obviously, there's There's the Teaching English groups that you can join, and Teaching English resources on the website, where you can read lots of different articles and tips for different types of assessment. There's live webinars, of course, like this one, and thank you all for being here again. And there's training courses. So, for example, at the moment, the British Council is running an assessing learning course, which you can all join. And part of that course is you can also join the British Council Courses for Teachers group, where you can discuss specifically about assessment if this is an area of teaching which you want to improve, which I hope you all do because you're all here. Okay. And of course, as well, there's podcasts related to this, which are also on the website.
Yeah, and also if you want to meet us, we are also there in the British Council's community. So we'd be more than happy to have you there.
Yeah. So the first one was obviously self-reflection. So we would like you now to think about your current assessments and the way that you assess. And think about these 5 points here. So we've got a kind of can-do statement. So a teacher who effectively assesses learning can. And there are 5 things here. Obviously, if you can tick them all off, then you're a much better teacher than I am. But there are some of these that I can definitely improve. How about you, Rabia? Which of these do you think you could probably develop and kind of work on as a teacher?
I think number 4, planning for differentiated inclusive assessment. I think because I didn't have a model for that when I was growing up, so I find it difficult, but I'm getting there. I'm going through a lot of resources and working in this area a lot, but this is something that I think I still need to develop. What about you?
Yeah, I actually think I was going to say number 1, but I think I've changed my mind. I think it's actually number 5. I think sometimes when I do assessments, I don't actually think about them much afterwards, because as a teacher, sometimes you get the assessment, you mark the assessment, you give it back, and then you move on. But I don't necessarily reflect on how I delivered that assessment and whether I delivered it in an effective way, and if there are some changes that I could make to the assessment to make it more effective, and like with you, make it more inclusive, make it more differentiated, maybe think about the criteria that I use. So yeah, I think number 5 is definitely something I can improve.
I think I overdo that a little bit. I do too much reflection. Even I take it to heart. Even the children cannot attempt a question. I'll keep on thinking about what was wrong with that question. Did I use some, ambiguous words, or the question was not right? So I'm an overthinker. So which is also not right. But I think reflecting does help a lot. What do we have in chat, Stephen? Right now I can't chat.
Okay, so there's lots of 4s and 5s, so the same as us, about the inclusive assessment, the reflection. There's a few. Dina Moras says number 2 about defining assessment criteria, which is very important, so the learners know what they need to do. There's not so many 3s actually, so that makes me think that everybody is using a mix of formative and summative assessment, which is good to hear, definitely.
Okay. Great. So in the course of this webinar, we're going to talk about what each of this area entails, what you can do to improve in this area. We'll ask you some questions and we'll share some resources for each of these. So the first one is assessment tasks. We already talked about designing of the tasks and why it is important. So could you please tell us what assessment tasks you find yourself using again and again, like your go-to assessment, something that you repeatedly do, you like doing, and it helps you understand or get the information that you want. What about you, Stephen? What's your go-to assessment task?
Well, actually, I mean, I much more prefer in my lessons informal kind of assessment, because I think it tells me a lot about the kind of progress of the learners, where they are, what we need to do next, and I think it's the most helpful. So, I mean, a kind of common way that I do this is through kind of concept checking questions when we're doing maybe introducing grammar or introducing vocabulary, just to assess. Another common way, and it's probably something I maybe do too much, is to use a kind of test teach test lesson. That's probably the most common way that I assess learners. I give them a task to see what they can do. I respond by maybe giving feedback on the areas where they struggle, and then I get them to do a similar task again. That's probably the one I use the most. How about you, Rabia?
I use exit tickets a lot, and
Mm,
especially the ones like something new that I've learned, something I need to know more about, and I change the question to like something I'd like to tell one of my like family members or something that I've read this and I came to know about that, or
mhm,
if it's with teachers, something that I'll tell my colleague and something that I apply, go and teach in my school, so things like that. So
mhm,
I always want them to think about what they have. So that helps me get feedback about this is something I need to improve, I need to add in the next days. So
mhm.
having those exit tickets, I think for me that's my go-to activity. What are people saying? What are other teachers saying in the chat?
Um, I can see, for example, using KWL. So, what do you
Okay.
know? What would you want to know? What have you learned? I think that's a really nice way to do it. Meher Yassin has put brainstorming down, which sometimes maybe people don't think of as an assessment task, but it is a good way to kind of see what vocabulary, for example, your learners know about a topic. I think that's a really good one. Um, let me have a look at that. Okay, there's objective tests, multiple choice questions, um, drilling my students daily about topics seen a while ago. And that's quite a nice idea, obviously. So you get the kind of, you go back to what you've done. Nazneen Anjum says about peer assessment, um, which is a very important thing. And it's something you have to teach your learners how to do. And yeah, storytelling, presentations as well. Yeah, there's lots of different ideas there.
Okay, this is great, and I think that knowing what your go-to assessment task is important. But I think next step is how you can adapt it, how you can improve it. So, and thinking about is it still giving you all of the answers that you wanted to? Is it helping you in the same way? Does it work for all learners?
Mhm.
So is it still serving the purpose that you wanted? So do the reflection bit with everything that you do, and it will help you improve and benefit as well. So Stephen, is there like one assessment task that you have designed and you think that worked really well? Can you tell us about that?
Um, well, I think I kind of repeat a little bit maybe what I talked about is in terms of the like um using a kind of test, like an assessment app that works well, I generally find is one that doesn't seem like an assessment. So if you're giving students like a task, maybe I think one person in the chat actually mentioned about using role plays, and I think that's a nice way. So you kind of set up a task where it's maybe like a doctor and a patient, and they have to do the task, and then once they've done the task, that obviously informs you as a teacher what you then need to teach them to then improve their ability to do that particular role play. And I think those kind of tasks where it's kind of a disguised assessment, for me, they've worked quite well, especially when it's something that's kind of real life. And definitely the real life things work well. How about you, Rabia?
For me, there was like once I had an Olympiad kind of assessment where I had different stations and I have put different tasks and they have to work as a group. They're
Mm,
like simultaneous stations and they'll complete a task and they'll go to the next one. So it was kind of a competition time. They were enjoying it and I also felt that it has gone very well. And but by the time they reached the final station, they were all exhausted
mm,
mentally and physically because that was challenging. They have to do it in rush, they have to listen to everyone and then rush to the next station as well. So
mhm,
that is when I thought that maybe keeping it a little simple, um, having less stations, not imposing the time limit could have decreased the pressure a little bit. So maybe thinking about that would have helped make it. I thought it's going to be fun, but it became really exhausting for them at the end.
Fine. Yeah, I mean, there's one in the chat from somebody called Sylvia Mendez who mentions that about using the gallery walk as an activity, not as an assessment. I mean, that's one that I've struggled with sometimes, like because you ask the students, you give the students maybe criteria for evaluating what's on the wall around them, and maybe it's a text that the students have written, but they end up just evaluating the language rather than the content, even though you try to ask them to kind of focus on the content.
Yeah. For me, when I'm having this gallery walk kind of activity, for me that is assessment. If they can answer that question, if they can, I can hear them discussing. So while we are monitoring, while we're observing, actually we are assessing. Actually, we're trying to understand if they're able to do that. So they know that language. They can write something related to that. So for me, I think everything in the classroom can be assessment and can be a source of for you collecting or gathering more information about your learners. This is one webinar that I would recommend for all of you, that how can we design multimodal assessment tasks for language classroom. It will help you to cater all kinds of learners in your classrooms. Something that I have struggled with, because we make or design tasks keeping in mind what we have taught. We don't keep in mind our learners, so we don't think about the learning. So we only think about, this is the topic that I have covered, not so maybe I really enjoyed this, and hopefully you're going to enjoy that as well. One other tip that I can give for designing assessment tasks is always bring variety. If you keep on doing the same thing, they would be bored, and even if they know, they'll stop participating. So try out a variety of tasks, and also collect feedback from the learners. Did they enjoy the task? What kind of tasks would they like to take part in? And work with other teachers, collaborate with other teachers, so that you know how they are doing that, so you can learn from each other as well. Stephen and I work together, and I think I learned a lot from him, and hopefully I would have contributed something to him as well, because I work in a different context. So learning from each other, I think that is something really important. Any tips that you have, Stephen, for this area? How can they improve in this area?
I mean, when it comes to kind of designing the assessments themselves, I think a lot of it is also to do with kind of trial and error, and also kind of finding out. I mean, the multimodal thing I think is important, and the variety is definitely important. It's also, I think it's important to ensure that trying out different types of tests, because then you'll kind of learn what kind of learners you have as well. So then you can find out whether some learners kind of respond better to spoken tests, whether some learners respond better to, I think in the chat, there's been things about like objective tests, like multiple choice questions and things like that. So I think we were talking about this another time, about in terms of like maybe you've got analytical learners, so, or more analytical learners. So you kind of helping them with that kind of learner and making sure the questions are for that kind of learner. But also, I think making sure that that kind of learner also is exposed to different types of questions, so they get more comfortable with less analytical questions. So it's kind of, I think it's about trying out with your learners what works, what doesn't, the same with as when we're teaching.
Yeah, and also keeping in mind that a complicated assessment is not always a good one. Keep it simple. You just don't need to confuse the learners. You just need to, get a clear insight of where they are. So try to have, less complicated, not multi-stage tasks. Keep them simple with clear instructions, and hopefully that would help.
Yeah.
Moving on to define and apply assessment criteria.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of look at, I mean, this was one thing I was thinking about in terms of designing the test. When you're designing the tests, one thing that you need to think about is obviously the criteria that you're going to be testing the students on. So if you're thinking about, it could be formative assessment, it could be summative assessment, but do you share the criteria with your learners? And what happens when you do? So Rabia, how about you? What do you share criteria? Have you tried that? What ways have you done that?
I think that it has helped and saved a lot of time for me as well, because when they exactly know what they have to do, it's kind of, giving them a roadmap. Take this turn, take this turn, and take this turn, and then you'll reach your destination. So this is what we give to the learners, that this is what we're going to be assessed on. They know what they have to do. They look at their own work, self assess with the help of that criteria and see where the gaps are. So it helps me decrease my workload as well. And it's a tool that every teacher should use. What happens when you do, it saves time for all of us, and it gives ownership to the learner for what they're learning. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think is very important, like you said, I think that word you use then, ownership, is very key. And I think asking your learners what the criteria are and getting them involved in creating the criteria is another thing that you can do. So, for example, if you're asking your students to create posters, um, before they even start creating the poster, you need to discuss with them what is a good poster, what does it include, and get the ideas from their learners. Because if they've created the criteria themselves, then they're more invested in making the poster. They're more interested in doing it well, and they can refer to the criteria while they're making it as a group. So yeah, I think success criteria are incredibly important, but I think because learners do know, they know what a good poster looks like. So kind of asking them what that is and then sharing that with them. And then when they're kind of comparing each other's posters at the end, they can refer to that criteria and then use that to judge each other's, and we can use it as well as part of our assessment. So you can include peer assessment there as well, and teacher assessment. So yeah, so obviously one way that you can develop is through using resources that we have on the Teaching English website, and on here there's a specific one which is focused on assessing learners online. So that, oh, I've lost the link again. I'll see if I can share it again. Hold on a second, everybody. Okay. Okay, Melissa, is everyone able to see it now?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. So yeah, so this is obviously a guidance on how to create criteria for assessing your learners, but specifically in an online context. So if some of you are working online with students, please use this article, and we'll obviously share it with you at the end of the session. So another thing that we talked about at the start, and most of you seem to be doing, was using formative and summative assessment appropriately. So the question that we have for you this time is, which one do you lean on more? Do you lean on more on formative or more on summative? So Rabia, are you back now?
I think I am, and I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening. My internet is fine, but
That's okay.
somehow I keep on getting dropped off.
So
Okay.
that's okay. Don't worry. What for you, Rabia? What do you lean more on? I mean, for me personally, I tend to use much more formative. I try to avoid summative as much as I can, but I always know that towards the end of courses, towards the end of terms, I need to do tests for the students to give them a sense of validation, but also maybe when I'm teaching kids, for the parents to see, okay, my child has developed over the course and they've got such and such a score. How about you? Which one do you lean on the most?
I think for me, summative assessments are kind of stressful,
Mm-hmm.
And because I am like really empathetic towards my learners, I kind of avoid them, which
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be done, but I'm more into formative. And even if it's summative, I try to, decrease the amount of stress involved with that by involving them into discussing. I don't take surprise tests. They know what they're going to be assessed on, sharing
Mm-hmm.
the assessment criteria with them. So I do both, but I lean on formative assessment more. I think that gives me a good picture. And I think with summative assessments, I don't know how many of you do that. I treat them as formative as well. Whatever the findings, if I analyze the results and I see if there is one particular question that they were not able to do, maybe that question type I need to work on, maybe I need to have some kind of supporting learning activity related to that
Mm-hmm.
topic or idea. So I think, a formative assessment person. I do more of that.
Okay, and is there a particular kind of formative assessment that you like to use?
I think presentations,
Okay.
whenever and discussions, I like to see, and I think I like to read their responses as well. So when
Mm-hmm.
they're expressing themselves, presenting themselves in the speaking activities, or when they submit an essay, I love knowing more about them. So that kind of thing, I think that when I can give them comments instead of grades, to oh, I love reading
Mm-hmm.
that about your essay, and you could have done it, improved it, or maybe added this to make it even better, things like that, giving
Mm-hmm.
them suggestions. So this is something that I would really practice a lot, and like um, I think the best way to get to know your learners is reading and listening to them, reading their writing and listening to them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so there's been some interesting comments about formative and summative assessment in the chat. So for example, Kati saying Doi Meadios. I'm sorry if I pronounce your name not great, but one thing she mentions about formative assessment is that it's low stakes, it's frequent, and it's adjustable to meet learner needs. And I think that's a really good point about it. And it kind of gets you comfortable with being assessed, but takes away some of the stress that you were talking about as well, Rabia.
Okay,
Okay.
do you want
Um,
me to share screen?
yeah, sure, you can.
Okay. uh, Warning, I'm dropping out again and again, so I'm sorry if I do that again.
Okay.
So there's this uh, assessment for learning toolkit, and the link is there. And Stephen and I have come up with a handout as well, where you can get a lot of ideas and different activities that you can use in your classrooms.
Mhm.
The link to the handout will be given to you, and use this toolkit as well. And we'll be sharing some other resources that can help you with assessment for learning. When you will click on this link, you'll get a PDF. It's kind of a workshop which you can use with your colleagues as well. I think the best way to develop as a teacher is to work with other teachers. You will learn a lot when you start discussing your ideas and learning from each other. So try and use that with the teachers that you work with in your school, or any online community that you have. And then we have planning for differentiated and inclusive assessment. This is my area of development, and I'd love Stephen to tell me what I can do to improve in that.
Okay, so in terms of, I think in terms of a tool or strategy that I've used to include all the learners, I think one thing, I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, is in terms of variety, basically. So ensuring that when I'm doing, I mean, even with formative assessment, making sure that I'm doing different types of tasks that appeal to different types of learners. So, for example, when you've got shyer learners, making sure that you're focusing on things that they are good at. So, making sure that there is reading involved in the lesson, or listening tasks that they are good at, um, and I think one thing that's important as part of this is obviously the way that you give feedback to the learners. So a strategy that I definitely use when it comes to kind of like one-to-one feedback with students is giving them very specific feedback instead of kind of just saying, "Oh, here are your grades" or something like that. I think you mentioned this a little bit before, Rabia, about making sure that the feedback you're giving them is something that's useful and it includes praise. So like talking about that shy learner, saying to them, like, your reading and listening skills are excellent. If you want to develop them more, here is something that you can do. And the same with maybe the areas that they're weaker in. So the speaking, so giving them something very specific that they can do to improve that. And I think one thing that's really important about that is that it can be individualized, so that makes it more inclusive and it makes it more differentiated, but also it gives them something very specific that they can focus on and try to improve. And I think it's really important when we're giving assessment is that the feedback we give, like you were mentioning before about like personalized comments about like writing, "Oh, I really enjoyed this part of your article," which I think is great. But I think it's also when you're doing that is also when you give the kind of not the negative feedback, but the kind of critical or developmental feedback, you give them something very specific to do. So like you wouldn't say, "Oh, you need to improve your grammar." You'd give them like a very specific grammar point that they can improve, or a very specific area of vocabulary that they can work on. And it's got to be something that they can action soon rather than something that's going to take them forever. I think we talked about, was I talking? I might have been talking to somebody else, Rabia, about this. But like when teachers mark papers and they give students, they say that the students can't use articles very well. I mean, it's not particularly useful for a learner to be told that because it's going to take them a very long time to be able to use articles effectively. So focusing on something that you think they can actually change is very important.
Exactly, exactly. And we have some resources here. This is one inclusive assessment approaches. You can, we'll be sharing the link and you can get to know about that. And then we have, Stephen's going to talk about some activities that we can use for inclusion.
Okay, so this one is, we've got two here. So we've got a kind of graphic organizer, which can be used as a kind of, it's a way basically, I think I saw a question earlier in the chat about kind of scaffolding, and this kind of scaffolds the story to help students prepare. So some students can just start writing, but I think in order, like if you're doing a kind of story with this, you give them a kind of clear structure for how to do it, and that supports those kind of learners. I think this kind of the answer choice cards is kind of something similar. So they can answer without speaking and just show ABC. And it's the same thing, for example, when you're giving assessment to the learners, is you can give them kind of differentiated tasks, but this is probably maybe a little bit more for formative assessment. But like if you've got the similar thing with like ABC, where you kind of maybe you've got a text where there's a gap fill, and maybe for stronger students there's just a gap. For slightly less strong students, there would be a kind of word that they have to adapt. So maybe if it's about word formation, they have to change it from a noun to an adjective or something like that. And then for students who are a little less confident, you could give them actual choices so they can just tick the choice. So that kind of thing is something that you can do. This plus minus interesting is something for us maybe as teachers, where the students can inform us about.
It could be for peer assessment as well. They could look
Yeah.
at each other's and then they can, like do star and a wish, something like that. They can do with each other as well. And what we were talking about, criteria. So maybe we can share checklists like this,
Mhm.
where they, can say, okay, tick a box. I've done this and I've done that. And then like the ABC cards, we can use these whiteboards as well. They can write their answers and then they can show to the teachers. And Again, the learning ladders could be the same, like can do statements, like the ones we shared. So I can do that and I can do that. So with the learning, they write the can do statements here, they make a ladder, and then they're climbing the ladder step by step, so it gives them confidence as well. So some of these inclusive activities you can use with all of your learners. Different types of learners would enjoy that, and hopefully they will help you in assessment as well. Uh, we talked about reflecting on your approach and your assessment literacy a lot, and we want you to take a quick minute and think about what's one thing from the things that we've been talking about that I want to improve, and what is my plan to improve. I said that the area for me to improve is designing differentiated or inclusive tasks. And Stephen has shared 6 activities, and my plan is to maybe try and do one of them. What's yours, Stephen? Maybe you have started. I'm asking you to reflect.
Yes, exactly. So I said that I wanted to improve my reflection. So maybe kind of, one thing that I would probably do is actually using something that you just mentioned about like a criteria. So what's the criteria for a successful assessment? And kind of using a criteria while I'm doing the assessment, but also after the assessment, thinking about things that I can improve and the way that it's delivered. But I think one way that I could definitely do that is asking about the learners how they felt during the assessment, like what was good about it, but also maybe what was stressful about it. And I think because sometimes well, no, I know that when I do assessments, it's just like, here's an assessment, get on with it. But I don't always kind of think about it from the learner's point of view, and kind of how could I make the assessment a more kind of comfortable rather than stressful experience.
Okay, so this is one learning pathway that we have that you can use, and there are a lot of what would you say? There is a workbook there. There are a lot of videos that you can use. We'll be sharing the link for this workbook. Use that to reflect on your learning and share what you have learned with us. With this, I think we should go to the final reflection. No, about the training courses. Stephen, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so we mentioned at the beginning that there are courses running over the next 3 months, being offered by the British Council. The 3 kind of key courses that are going to be running as new courses are Assessing Learning, Teaching English in Primary, and Teaching English through Literature. You can all find all of these in the training section on the Teaching English website. If you join those courses, you'll get access to lots of resources. You'll get you can also join the Facebook community for British Council Courses for Teachers, where you'll be working with us. And you can ask questions, and we can discuss this topic in more depth.
Yeah, and then you can subscribe to our newsletter, and you can join these courses. And these courses, they have content about assessment embedded in them. So I think that's all. Let's end this with a self-assessment on a scale of 1 to 5. How confident are you now in assessing learning and your learners? For me, I think it's 4. I think I can do it better than I used to do it earlier. What about you, Stephen?
I don't know. I'm always quite. I try not to be too overconfident with these things, so I always say 3 because I always know that there is something that I can do better, and I think that's I hope that's the right attitude to have, because there's always something that I can learn, and obviously if I know I can keep on learning, and I know I can, then hopefully that kind of attitude goes to my students as well.
I can see a lot of 3s, 4s, and 5s, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, I can see some people as well who have already started some of the courses, and that's great to hear.
So we have some questions in the Q&A as well, and I'll have to wear my
Hi.
glasses. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Rabia. Thank you so much. That was full of ideas, full of resources and ways to keep on learning. Definitely what teachers want. So that was great. We had a really nice time. Lots of people are asking, can we get all the resources? The answer is yes,
Mhm.
yes. Even Rabia handout, and you get the handout. We'll post it in the chat in the comments.
Mhm.
You'll be able to find it on the event page, and in the handout is a link to the pathways that they talked about, the link to the professional practices, and then when you go in there, you'll find all the other links to all the other things you've talked about. So don't worry, everything is there. So uh, got a little bit of time for questions. Are you happy to answer audience questions?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, great. Let's go for it. So, um, I am going to choose one I think is interesting. It's from Ahmed, and Ahmed talks about formative assessment that the teacher does, and then he asks, should he inform the learners of their grades or the comments he's written down, or should he just cut to the chase and apply a plan of what he wants to do? Um, yeah, what's your opinion there? Are you all telling students what notes you've taken about them, or are you just using it to know what you're going to do next?
For me, I think we're partners, the learners and the teachers, in the process of learning. So you can't hide things from them. If you're hiding, I
Yeah.
think,
Okay.
so I think you need to be fair, use feedback in a way that is not hurtful to your learners, but your job is to
Uh-huh.
increase their confidence and improve their learning.
Mm.
So I think it's good to inform them. Um, you will not lead them anywhere if you're hiding things from them.
Yeah, and I think actually, if you've got, because I mean, one thing that's very common is for a teacher to walk around a classroom, they've got a little notebook and they're writing things down.
Yeah.
Like, because obviously, one of the ways that we assess our learners is through observation. But
Mm.
what would, I mean, this is something that I haven't done that much, but one thing I remember someone told me about once is like having a notebook like this, but it's got little slips on it that you could tear off and give to the student. So as you're walking around, um, you can make, like Rabia said before, maybe two good things and something to improve, and you just write it down, you just
Uh-huh.
hold it up, put it on the desk next to them, and then they can pick it up and look at it.
Oh, I love
Um,
that.
yeah, which is it's very immediate, but it also gives the learner kind of
Yeah.
it gives them the feedback and it helps them kind of
Yeah.
feel that, oh, okay, the teacher is watching me. They are aware of me as a person as
Uh-huh.
opposed to me as in a class. And I know in
Mm.
large classes that can be hard because you've got like 50, 60, even 100 students. But I think
Mm.
when you're doing that kind of thing, what the teacher can say is, okay, I'm just going to monitor this area of the classroom today, and then the
Yeah.
next day you do another area, but then you can put little slips down, and then through the course of a term, each
Mhm.
student should get some kind of individualized feedback, which I think is a nice thing to do.
Yeah, and
Oh, it
also don't
really is,
highlight
and it,
each and every mistake. Sorry, Melissa. A lot of
it's
teachers
okay.
tend to, highlight the essays with red marker and say a lot of it. They think that they're trying to help the learner, but
Mhm.
try,
Mm.
pick the most important areas that they need to work on and let the
Mhm.
others go. Focus on like the things that they can work on immediately, and rest of the things would follow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to see things. I really love the idea of the little slip that you give to students. It'd be really lovely as a student to receive that as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Especially if it's got
Especially.
positive stuff on it. Yeah.
Hmm. Cool. Let's go to one other question that's kind of quite of the moment, and it's about AI rubric. So, Beatrix asks, um, there are AI rubrics that you can find online, you can make online to assess writing tasks. What do you think about them? Are they ready to use in your experience, or not so great?
Have you tried them, Rabia? I have. I mean,
I
what my
designed them myself.
Mhm.
Like I haven't used anybody's ready to made, because then, like so the first part of assessment literacy was knowing your context. So you need to
Yeah,
tweak
right.
everything according to your context and policies. So what I do is I give the prompts and I create a rubric myself, but I never fully, what would you say, just print it and use it. I always look
Yeah.
at it, yes, match it with the assessment, with my expectations, and then I redo it always. So you can't completely
Mhm.
trust it. So AI
That's
then
good.
hallucinates sometimes as well. So it's always good to recheck
Yeah.
things, yeah,
Yeah,
according
and
to your
Good
context.
advice.
and
I
also
hope that
the
answers your question, Beatrix. I'm really sorry,
it's okay.
Stephen. I know
Sorry,
you
don't
wanted
worry.
to say something there, but our time is up.
Mhm.
So thank you, Rabia. Thank you, Stephen. Um, as you said, people can get to know more of your ideas if they join Courses for Teachers Facebook group,
Mhm.
and of course, join a course and work alongside them. There's an amazing course, Assessing Learning, that's open now that anyone can enroll on. We really encourage you to enroll on that course or another course that interests you. Um, we'll put all the links in the comments in the chat for you. But our time is up, so let's say goodbye to Stephen, goodbye to Rabia. A huge thank you. A thank you to Kath, who's been moderating here in Zoom. Thank you to Wiam, who's been moderating in Facebook. And we'll be back in 15 minutes for the next webinar. We are meeting Ana Paula Biazon Rocha to talk about effective pronunciation feedback. So the theme of assessment with a different twist. So don't go away. We'll be back soon. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your contribution.